My stepfather thought he could break me while I was still recovering, but the day he hit me in that hospital room, he unknowingly signed his own downfall. I remember the ceiling first. Those yellowed tiles with little brown water stains, the hum of the fluorescent lights, and that faint, sour smell of disinfectant and reheated cafeteria food drifting in through the half-open door. My back felt like it was full of hot nails, my legs heavy and useless under the blanket. The morphine had worn off just enough that every breath reminded me they'd cut into my spine a few hours ago. Cleveland General isn't the kind of hospital you see on TV. No shiny chrome, no quiet, elegant nurses gliding around. It's crowded, loud, and smells like fear and sweat. Voices echo off the concrete. Someone always seems to be crying down the hall. That night, the snow outside was slushy and half-melted, and I could hear the tires hissing on wet asphalt every time the automatic doors opened in the distance. I thought the worst part of that day was the surgery. Then Carl walked in. He filled the doorway like bad news. Leather jacket, still smelling like oil and exhaust, his face red from the cold or from whatever he'd been drinking in his truck outside. The fluorescent lights gave his skin a sickly gray tint, and for a second, I thought he looked like one of the corpses they rolled past the ward, covered in sheets. "Look at you," he said, shutting the door behind him with a little too much force. "Lying around like a princess." His voice had that fake casual tone he used on camera, like when he was explaining how to restore a fender to the audience. Only now, every word landed like a jab. My mother had been there earlier, crying and fussing over my blankets. But Carl? He waited until visiting hours were almost over. He liked me tired. He liked me cornered. "You know what the guys are saying at the shop," he went on, taking those slow, measured steps toward my bed. The overhead light reflected off his thinning hair. "They're saying you're soft. That you can't handle a little accident. A little accident. The lift that slipped. The car that dropped." The way my back lit up like a bomb went off inside it. I didn't realize yet that this conversation would end with his hand across my face and my blood on the hospital floor. I also didn't realize that would be the best thing that ever happened to me. If you really want to understand what happened in that hospital room, you have to understand the world we came from. That doesn't start with Carl hitting me. It starts with rust. Cleveland rusts differently than other places. It creeps under paint, eats at metal, stains concrete. It gets into your bones the same way the lake wind does. Our neighborhood was mostly brick boxes and tired wood frame houses pressed too close together, like no one trusted open space. The old factories loomed in the distance, broken windows patched with plywood, smokestacks long dead but still pointing at a sky that never seemed fully blue. We lived in a squat, two-story house on the corner of a block nobody really claimed. The curb was cracked. The chain-link fence out front leaned like it had given up. Our neighbor across the street worked nights and drank days and knew more than he ever said. You could tell by the way he looked away when Carl's voice rose through the walls. The house smelled like stale coffee, detergent, and whatever Carl had brought home from the garage: oil, gasoline, metal dust. In winter, the windows sweated on the inside, and the radiators clanged like they were protesting being woken up again. The TV in the living room was almost always on, sometimes playing the local news, sometimes reruns of the show Carl was on, Rust to Glory. That was his thing. The show. It wasn't national or anything. Just a regional cable thing where they followed a handful of local legends, fixing up junked cars and flipping them. They loved Carl. He knew exactly how to stand, how to smile, which jokes to make. He'd toss a rag over his shoulder, flash that, "aw shucks" grin, talk about hard work and second chances. He'd pat my shoulder when cameras came by the shop, call me the best damn mechanic this side of the Cuyahoga, like he was proud. When the cameras were off, he'd call me a liability. "Move faster, Ray. We don't have all damn day. It's not that complicated. Are you stupid or just lazy? You're 34 and still living in my house. Maybe act like you deserve the roof over your head. My full name is Raylan, but no one's called me that since I was 10. My mom used to, before Carl. Now she only did when she was crying. My mother, Denise, was one of those women who always looked like she'd just woken up from a bad dream. Her hair was usually half done, her sweater sleeves stretched out, shoulders rounded like she was always bracing for something. She used to laugh a lot, I'm told. I don't remember that version clearly. The one I know wrung her hands, apologized to furniture when she bumped into it, and called Carl, honey, with this careful, trembling sweetness. She met him after my dad left. I was 16, angry, and convinced the world owed me something. Carl owned the garage a few blocks from our place. Mom's car died one winter, and she didn't have the cash for a big repair. Carl helped. He knocked a couple hundred off, told her he understood what it meant to struggle, slipped his card into her hand with that big, generous smile. Within a year, he was living with us. Within 2, they were married. By the time I turned 20, he'd already started calling the house my place. He took over the finances to help out. At least, that's how he sold it. You hate this stuff, Denise, he'd say, sorting through bills at the kitchen table, a beer on his right, calculator on his left. Let me handle it. You get anxious. I got a head for numbers. It started small. A shared account for the household. Her separate account to simplify things. Then the credit cards in his name, because his score was better. Some bills addressed jointly, some not at all. Mom signed what he put in front of her, pen shaking, always embarrassed she didn't understand the paperwork. I trust you, she'd say. He loved hearing that. As for me, I'd already been working odd jobs. I liked fixing things, bikes, lawnmowers, whatever people on the block brought over. Eventually, Carl pulled me into the garage full-time. Said he was giving me a chance. Said he was bringing me into the family business. What he really did was find a way to squeeze me dry. You're not apprenticing, you're lucky, he'd remind me. Most people would kill to be on TV. You're learning from the best for free. That's payment. I didn't get a real paycheck for the first 6 months. Then I got something that barely qualified, cash in an envelope, irregular amounts, based on how the episode does, or how the month is going. Meanwhile, I was putting in 10, 12-hour days, breathing in fumes, lifting transmissions, welding, grinding, doing the kind of work that leaves permanent scars. The shop itself was like a second home, just meaner. Old neon signs buzzing. A coffee machine that smelled burnt even when it was off. A radio that never quite found the right station. There was always a car half done, its guts hanging out, an engine on a stand like a metal heart. The floor was slick with oil if you weren't careful. The air tasted like metal shavings and exhaust. Guys came and went. A couple stayed longer, but most didn't. The ones who lasted long enough talked about dreams, moving out, starting their own shops, saving up. Eventually, they'd leave without a big speech, just a quiet disappearance and a thrown-together explanation from Carl. Couldn't cut it. Didn't have the right attitude. Some people don't know how good they got it. I believed him. For a while. Because that's what happens when you grow up inside someone else's narrative. They tell the story, they edit the scenes, and you start accepting their version of reality as the only cut that matters. If he said the guys were lazy, they were lazy. If he said money was tight, money was tight. If he said I was dramatic about my back pain, well, maybe I was. You're strong, he'd say when I winced picking up a gearbox. You're not like those soft girls who sit in offices. You're tough, Ray. You don't need breaks. He said it like a compliment. It was actually a sentence. Living at home meant I couldn't really escape him. Morning started with his footsteps in the hallway, heavy and entitled. Evenings ended with his voice carrying through the thin walls, arguing with a customer on the phone or lecturing my mom about her overreacting. If I went to the kitchen for water past 10, he'd be there, sitting at the table, laptop open, papers spread out. He'd look up slowly, like he'd caught me stealing something. Burning the midnight oil, he'd say. Hope you're ready for tomorrow. Got a big job coming in. TV crew wants us on schedule. My mom would peek from the living room, eyes worried, remote clutched in her hand. She'd give me this small, tired smile, like she was silently apologizing for him. Sometimes I'd think about moving out. Then I'd remember my bank account balance, the bills Carl reminded me I owed him for helping with, the debts I believed were mutual and fair. I figured I was stuck for another year, maybe 2. I'd save up. Get an apartment. Start over. That was before the lift slipped. Before my back surgery. Before the hospital room. The accident didn't feel like an accident at first. It felt like a bad day, the kind everyone at the shop got sometimes. We were behind schedule on a '69 Charger that the show's producers were obsessed with. The camera crew was coming back in 3 days. Carl was pacing like a caged animal, snapping at everyone. The lift we'd been using had been acting weird for weeks, jerky, slow, whining when it raised or lowered heavier frames. Needs maintenance, I'd said. More than once. Needs you to stop babying it, Carl had replied. I'd listened. Because that's what you do when everything you have is tied to one man's mood. So when the Charger went up on that same lift, I was under it, checking the suspension. I remember the cold of the concrete under my back. The drip of something near my ear. The muffled sound of a car driving past outside. Then a crack I felt more than heard. The world dipped. The car dropped a couple inches, just enough. Pain shot through my lower back like lightning, white-hot and blinding. I don't remember screaming, but people told me I did. The next clear image I have is the hospital ceiling, the yellowed tiles, the humming lights. Then my mom's wet, puffy eyes. Then the doctor explaining that the fall had aggravated an already vulnerable spine, that I'd need surgery, that recovery would be long and careful. Carl hovered at the edge of that conversation, arms crossed, jaw clenched. How long until she's back to normal? He asked. The doctor frowned. Miss Collins will need at least 3 months before she can even think about returning to any physically demanding job. Maybe longer. Carl nodded like he understood. But the look he gave me then wasn't worry. It was calculation. That was the setup, really. A lifetime of raised voices, subtle threats, controlled money, and quiet manipulations. By the time his hand finally connected with my face in that hospital room, the ground under me had already been eroded for years. I just hadn't seen how far the cracks went yet. The night Carl hit me in the hospital, it was snowing, those wet, sticky flakes that turned to dirty slush the moment they hit Cleveland pavement. I could smell the cold on him before he even opened his mouth. That metal and winter scent that clung to men who worked in garages and didn't bother with gloves. He didn't sit. He never sat unless he wanted to look relaxed, and right then he wanted height, wanted angle, wanted intimidation. He stood at the foot of my bed, broad shoulders blocking the hallway light, coat dripping from the weather. You really screwed us today, he said. My throat was dry. I nearly got crushed. No, he corrected, pointing a gloved finger at me like I was a stubborn carburetor. You nearly screwed us. Don't make this about your feelings, Ray. I had been awake maybe an hour. Still woozy. still trying to move my toes every few minutes to reassure myself I wasn't paralyzed. Doctors told me surgery went well, but my body hadn't caught up yet. Everything felt foreign, stitched together wrong. Carl stepped closer, exaggerating the limp he used for sympathy whenever cameras were around. The truth? It was an old injury, nothing major. But he liked playing it up. You know the schedule the producers have us on. You knew we couldn't afford delays. I stared at him. The lift was faulty. And you should have worked around it. Worked around it. Worked around a 2-ton car hanging on a failing hydraulic system. Typical Carl logic: if something broke, it was because someone else wasn't tough enough. I reached for the cup of water by the bed, hand trembling, pain flaring through my lower spine, and he watched me like I was inconveniencing him. You think we're rich? He asked suddenly. You think the show pays that well? You think we got a safety net if you decide to get fragile? It wasn't fragility. It was physics. Gravity. Reality. But Carl didn't believe in reality unless it served him. Mom's scared, I murmured. He snorted. Your mother is scared of empty milk cartons. That woman panics if she misplaces a sock. He walked to the window, looked at the parking lot below where snow gathered on windshields like cheap frosting. She'll be fine. What matters is the shop. The clients. The show. I was too tired to argue. Too sore to sit up straight. But something inside me, maybe rage, maybe self-preservation, wouldn't let me stay silent. You pushed me too hard, I said. I told you my back was acting up. I said it days ago. He turned sharply. You said it like a complaint, not a fact. You whine when it gets cold. You whine when it gets hot. How was I supposed to know this time was different? You saw me limping. And you exaggerated it. You're dramatic. I clenched my teeth. Carl, I couldn't feel my legs after the fall. His face twisted. Not with concern. With contempt. I needed you to suck it up. That sentence landed heavier than any blow later would. I inhaled slowly, feeling stitches tug deep inside me. You expected me to keep working? You're damn right I did. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing like an angry insect. A nurse laughed down the hall. Somewhere, a patient coughed wetly. The world around us kept moving, unaware I was inches from breaking. He leaned in. You think you can just lie here while I carry everything? You think that's fair? I blinked hard, trying not to cry. I hated crying. He loved when I cried. It proved his point that I was emotional. You don't carry everything, I whispered. I work. I pay bills. You exist because I let you exist. The sentence froze me. I'd heard versions of it before, disguised as jokes. But this was blunt, sharp, deliberate. You're lucky, he continued. Lucky I let you into the shop. Lucky I treat you like family. Lucky you're not out on your ass paying rent somewhere with that pathetic salary they'd give you at a real garage. I felt something in my chest crack, not bone, not muscle. Something older. Mom wouldn't let you throw me out. He laughed. Your mother signs whatever I tell her to sign. Don't pretend she's got a spine. My pulse spiked. She's sick. She's dramatic, he corrected again. Always has been. I give her supplements to help and she still complains. The supplements. The drinks he mixed for her. The powders she said tasted bitter. The pills he insisted were natural. Something in my gut twisted, something I hadn't let myself examine too closely. I'll be out of work for months, I said softly. The doctor said, I don't care what the doctor said. The room went cold. Even the heater buzzing under the window felt far away. "You aren't staying here long," he said. "Insurance is a joke. Hospital bills are stacking. You need to get back on your feet." I stared at him, shocked. "I just had surgery. You'll heal faster if you push yourself." My breath caught. Push myself? "Carl, I can barely sit up." He rolled his eyes like I was a child begging not to go to school. "People break their backs in war and walk months later. I expect the same grit from you. You're not a soldier, but you could at least act like you've got some pride." I tried to swing my legs off the bed, more to prove him wrong than anything else, and nearly blacked out from the pain. My vision tunneled. My hands shook violently. He watched me struggle. Watched me fail. And smirked. "You're embarrassing," he said. "You're supposed to be tough." Something hot rose in my throat, a scream I swallowed because the nurse walked by the open door. Carl waited until she passed. Then he got close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. "You think you're special," he whispered. "You think I wouldn't survive without you? I carried this family before you. I'll carry it after you." I looked up at him, trembling. "I'm not your property." His eyes darkened. I'd seen that look before. At the shop, when a supplier dared negotiate with him. At home, when Mom asked why he needed her debit card again. But I'd never been alone with it this close, this raw. "You're whatever I say you are." I opened my mouth to speak, and that's when he hit me. A fast, sharp slap across the left cheek. Not hard enough to knock me out of bed. He didn't want bruises, didn't want explanations, but hard enough that my head snapped sideways and pain shot through my neck and down the fresh incision along my spine. I gasped. He watched. Satisfied. "You're going to get better," he said calmly, "because I need you back at that shop." My cheek throbbed. My back screamed. Something in me caught fire. A nurse walked by again, and Carl stepped back, pretending to adjust my blanket like a caring relative. When she disappeared, he leaned in one more time. "And don't tell your mother," he whispered. "She'll just make it worse." Then he left. No apology. No hesitation. No shame. Just walked out, letting the door swing shut behind him. I lay there frozen, tears leaking silently down my temples, mixing with the antiseptic smell. For years, I had swallowed his comments, swallowed his manipulation, swallowed his entire mythology that he was the hero who kept us afloat. But lying there in that cheap hospital bed, tasting blood on my lip and feeling my spine burn under the gauze, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just rage. It wasn't just humiliation. It was clarity. He wasn't invincible. He wasn't untouchable. And for the first time, I realized he wasn't even careful. He had left fingerprints, literal and metaphorical, on everything he touched. Paperwork. Deals. People he'd burned. And in that brutal, ugly moment, I understood something. If he wanted a fight, he'd finally picked a version of me who had nothing left to lose. The slap wasn't the injustice. It was the invitation. And I had every intention of accepting it. The first thing I did when they discharged me wasn't go home. It was sit in my mom's beat-up sedan in the hospital parking lot and breathe. Really breathe. The air smelled like exhaust and fresh snow, and every inhale made my stitches ache, but it was still better than being inside that building where Carl had left his mark on my face. Mom was driving, hands trembling on the wheel, eyes darting to my cheek every few seconds like she was too scared to ask. She hadn't seen the slap, Carl made sure of that, but she sensed something. Moms always do, even the ones who've spent years being hollowed out by the wrong men. "You want me to stop at the pharmacy?" You need anything for pain? She asked in that small voice she used when she was trying not to cry. No, I said. I'm fine. I wasn't fine. Sitting upright felt like punishment. But I didn't want her seeing how bad it really was. Not yet. Not until I understood what was happening to her. Because the more I replayed Carl's comment about the supplements, the more something in my gut twisted. When we got home, Carl's truck wasn't there. Good. I didn't want to see him. The house was warm, radiator clanking like always. Mom helped me to the couch, fussing with pillows, offering tea, apologizing for apologizing. You don't have to, I started. I know, honey, I know, she said fast, blinking too much. I just want you comfortable. But she wasn't comfortable. She looked pale, paler than before, and her hands shook when she reached for the throw blanket. How long have you been feeling sick? I asked casually. She froze. Sick? What do you mean? You look tired, I said. And you were nauseous last week. Oh, that. She waved a hand, dismissing her own symptoms like a chore she hadn't gotten to yet. It's just stress. Carl says my iron is low. He got me new vitamins. She reached for the little ceramic bowl on the coffee table, the one Carl liked because it hid clutter. Inside were 3 pills, 2 beige, 1 greenish, shiny and perfectly lined up like soldiers. She picked up the green one. He says this one gives me energy, she said with forced cheer. My stomach dropped. When did he start giving you those? Oh, a while back. She shrugged. He says they help balance me out. He researches natural supplements all the time. Carl didn't research anything except ways to make money and ways to hide what he was taking from other people. Don't take that, I said too quickly. Her hands stalled halfway to her mouth. Why not? I don't trust anything he hands out without labels. She frowned. Ray, don't start. He's trying to help. He worries. No, he didn't. He controlled. Help was the costume he wore on TV. But before I could say more, the front door opened, cold air spilling in with Carl's heavy footsteps. Look who's home. His voice boomed cheerfully, like he hadn't slapped me in a hospital room hours before. How's my girl feeling? My cheeks still stung. My spine throbbed. My jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. I forced a neutral expression. Better. He walked over and kissed the top of my head, public affection for an audience of one, my mom. Then he turned to her. Did you take your green pill today? She nodded. About to. He smiled. Good girl. Something dark moved through me. Mom put the pill in her mouth. I could have reached out. Knocked it from her hand. Screamed. But the fear in her eyes stopped me. Fear of his reaction. Fear of confrontation. Fear of being difficult. She swallowed. Carl beamed like he'd won something. He didn't know it, but that was the moment I started documenting everything. The next morning, I woke up early despite the pain. Carl had already left for the shop. Mom was in the kitchen brewing weak coffee and humming a warblay tune. The house smelled like filtered water, burnt toast, and whatever Carl's supplements were doing to her stomach. Mom, I said, leaning on the doorframe to steady myself. Show me the bottles he gives you. She hesitated, glancing toward the front door as if he might burst in. Then she reached into a high cabinet and pulled down a small plastic bag. Not bottles, loose packets. Clear plastic, heat-sealed, with unmarked pills inside. This is what he orders online, she said, smiling nervously, like she needed me to approve. There were dozens of packets. Some with single pills. Some with 5. All unlabeled. "Mom," my voice cracked. "This isn't normal." She pulled back like I'd slapped her. "Carl says the FDA overregulates things. That real natural medicine doesn't come with labels. He says that because labels would get him in trouble." "Oh, stop." She rubbed her temples. "You're always negative about him. Because he's hurting you." Her eyes flicked up. "He is not." "What about the headaches? The weight loss? The dizziness? You've been sick for months. It's menopause. You're 52. Menopause doesn't look like this." Her lips trembled. "Carl knows what's good for me." No. He knew what was good for him. And whatever those pills were, they were slowly destroying her. I couldn't walk well, so sneaking wasn't easy, but I waited until Mom was in the upstairs bathroom. Then I grabbed one of the green pills and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Later, when I was alone, I crushed it with the back of a screwdriver on a tissue. The smell that rose up was bitter and chemical, not herbal. I didn't recognize it, but I knew enough from working with engines and solvents to know it didn't belong in anyone's bloodstream. Something wasn't right. Something was making her worse. And Carl wanted her weak. Because weak people sign things. 2 days later, while Mom napped on the couch, I decided to finally check the mail Carl always intercepted. Walking to the mailbox felt like hiking uphill with a broken spine, but I pushed through it. Inside were envelopes addressed to me. Several. Thick ones. From banks I'd never used. I carried them back inside, heart pounding. Mom snored softly under the blanket as I sat at the kitchen table and tore open the first envelope. A car loan. In my name. For a 2019 Challenger I'd never seen. The second envelope, a lease application. Approved. Also in my name. The third, delinquency notice on a credit line opened 2 months earlier. My hands shook as I opened the next one, another loan, tied to a VIN number that looked suspiciously similar to the cars Carl often flipped at the shop. He had used me. Again. But this time financially. Identity theft. Fraud. In plain sight. Mom woke up to the sound of paper tearing. "What's all that?" she asked groggily. "Mail addressed to me," I said, swallowing hard. "Loans I didn't take out." Her face drained. "Carl handles the mail so things don't get lost. Carl handles the mail because he's hiding things." She wrapped the blanket around herself like armor. "Ray, don't say that." I slid the paperwork toward her. "Look. Just look." She scanned the top page, blinking fast. "This must be a mistake," she whispered. "It's not. He would never, he would." She shook her head violently. "Carl is good to us. He hits me, Mom." She froze. I'd never said it aloud. Not once. Not in all these years. Maybe I thought admitting it made it more real. Her voice cracked. "What?" "He hit me in the hospital." My throat tightened. "He has hit me before." She covered her mouth with her hand, eyes filling with tears. "No, no, he loves you. He loves control." But she wasn't ready to hear that. Not yet. She stood abruptly. "I need to lie down." And she fled upstairs. I sat there surrounded by fraudulent paperwork, invoices tied to cars that didn't exist, and loan numbers connecting to vehicles reported, flipped, in states Carl had never mentioned visiting. My pulse hammered. He was deeper into crime than I realized. And I had become one of his fronts. I needed answers, so that night, after Carl passed out drunk in his recliner and Mom pretended to sleep, I made my way to the garage. Not the shop, but the little detached garage behind our house where Carl kept old tools, spare parts, and the things he didn't want others touching. It was locked, of course. But I'd grown up picking locks. The cold made my fingers stiff, and pain radiated down my spine every time I bent even slightly, but after several minutes, the padlock clicked open. Inside, the air was stale with dust and the heavy scent of oil-soaked wood. A single bulb lit the cramped space, casting long shadows across boxes stacked haphazardly. I rifled through papers. Receipts. Titles. VIN listings. All with signatures that weren't his. Some were mine. Some were my mother's. All forged. My vision blurred with anger. Then I found a folder labeled simply D. Inside, medical forms. Insurance claims. Copies of my mother's signature. And documents transferring her assets, her tiny inheritance from her own mother, into Carl's name. She had signed them. But not knowingly. A chill crawled up my spine. Then, beneath that stack, I found something worse. 2 printed plane tickets to Belize. Departure, 3 weeks from now. For Carl and my mother. Not me. Next to the tickets was a typed document titled Property Transfer Agreement, transferring our house, the shop, and 2 vehicles into Carl's name upon their marriage anniversary, which was, conveniently, the day before the trip. Mom had already signed. Her signature wobbly. Faded. Like she wasn't fully conscious. I swallowed hard. He was planning to disappear. With her money. With her property. With her half-conscious body. And he planned to leave me behind holding the bag, legally responsible for loans, debts, stolen vehicles, and forged paperwork. My blood went cold. Footsteps crunched in the snow outside. Carl's voice. Ray? That you? I froze. The flashlight beam cut through the window. He tried the main door. Then walked around to the side. Heart racing, I shoved paperwork back into drawers, slipped the most incriminating pages under my shirt, and pulled the light string just as his shadow loomed. He opened the door a crack. Why is this open? He muttered. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. After a moment, he shut the door, muttering something about damn wind. His footsteps crunched away. I exhaled shakily. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. He was planning an escape. He was poisoning my mother. He was burying me in debt. And he was about to take everything. Unless I stopped him. The next day, 2 former employees reached out. Marco first. Then Davis. Messages I hadn't seen because Carl had my phone for safekeeping while I was in the hospital. They'd heard about my accident. Heard Carl's version. Which, apparently, involved me messing around, not paying attention, and costing the business thousands. Both men wrote the same thing: we need to talk. It's important. I met Marco first, at a cheap diner near the interstate. Sitting hurt like hell, but I braced myself against the booth and tried not to wince when he walked in. He looked older than I remembered. Exhausted. Hair thinner, beard rough like he'd stopped caring. You look like you've been through hell, he said gently. I have. He slid into the seat. I'm sorry. For what? For not saying something sooner. He explained everything. How Carl underpaid him. How Carl mismanaged payroll. How Carl had him sign documents under pressure, documents tying him to stolen car parts and resold Vince. How Marco only avoided jail by quitting and disappearing to another shop across town. Then Davis told me the same story later that night over the phone. Different details, same pattern. Carl wasn't just a manipulator. He wasn't just a bully. He was part of something bigger. An interstate network. Fake titles. Stolen parts. Identity loopholes. A whole web using the garage as a front. And I was tangled in the center of it. My back throbbed. My head spun. But beneath all that pain burned something fierce. Resolve. Carl thought he owned the narrative. Thought we were stuck, too scared or too weak to fight back. He was wrong. Very wrong. I had proof. I had witnesses. I had motive. And most importantly, I finally had nothing left to lose. The thing about working on cars your whole life is you start thinking in systems. Nothing exists alone. Every line connects to something else: fuel, air, spark. You can't just fix a single bolt and pretend the engine will magically run better. It's all connected. Turns out crime works the same way. I realized that the night I decided to stop pretending Carl was just a bad boss, or a difficult stepfather, and started treating him like what he was, a criminal. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the house dark except for the weak lamp above me. Mom was asleep upstairs, breathing shallowly, an empty water glass and pill packet on her nightstand. Carl was at the bar, meeting sponsors, which meant schmoozing on someone else's tab and coming home smelling like whiskey and applause. On the table in front of me, the paperwork I'd stolen from the backyard garage. Copies I'd made at the library because I didn't trust anything under our roof. Titles, VIN lists, fake bills of sale, and a small notebook with scribbled initials and interstate routes. Ohio. Pennsylvania. Michigan. Illinois. Next to the notebook, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I remembered Marco saying, "There are people looking into him. You're not the only one he screwed." I answered. "Hello?" A woman's voice, steady but tired. "Is this Raylan Collins?" "Yeah." "Who's this?" "My name is Angela Ruiz. I'm calling from a victims advocacy group that works with financial and fraud cases. I got your number from Marco Rivera. He said you have information about Carl Donovan." Hearing his full name out loud like that made my skin crawl. At the shop, he was just Carl. On TV, Carl from Rust to Glory. Hearing it in that calm, official tone made it sound like it belonged on a police report. "Depends what you want to know," I said carefully. "Let me ask you a different way," she replied. "Do you know how many cars have been reported stolen within a 50-mile radius of your stepfather's shop in the last 3 years?" I swallowed. "No, 47, she said. "And that's just what's been reported. Not counting the ones written off as lost paperwork or misfiled." My hand tightened around the phone. "And you think they all lead back to him?" "I know some of them do." The way she said no made the hair on my arm stand up. Angela explained that she'd been tracking a pattern. Cars disappearing from one state and reappearing in another with fresh titles. VIN numbers scraped, swapped, or restamped. Loans opened in names that didn't match the buyers. One of those names, recently, had been mine. "I see your name on 3 separate applications," she said. 2 were approved. 1 is in review. Did you authorize any of those?" "No," I said. "Carl did." "Do you have proof?" I looked at the stack of papers. "I have enough to make his life complicated." "Good," she said. "Because he's not just playing games with you and your mother. He's part of a network we've been trying to map for a while." The word network made my stomach drop. He's not that smart, I said automatically. He can't be some mastermind. She actually laughed, a short, humorless sound. He doesn't have to be smart. He just has to be useful. Middlemen don't plan the scheme. They move the product. Product. Cars. Titles. People. Your stepfather is one of several garage owners we've flagged, Angela continued. They restore the cars, clean up the paperwork, and flip vehicles that were either stolen or bought under fraudulent identities. That Challenger in your name? Its original owner reported it missing from a lot in Indiana. I felt dizzy. So he uses my credit, my name, to pull cars into his little side operation, I said. And when the dust settles, I'm the one holding the debt. Exactly. You're not his partner, Raylan. You're his buffer. My jaw clenched. She kept going. We also have records of multiple ex-employees complaining about missing wages, forced signatures, weird contracts. Most of them were too scared to go on record. Until now. Marco and Davis said you might help, I murmured. I can't promise a happy ending, Angela said. But I can promise you this, if you're willing to talk, and if you're willing to share what you have, we can build a case. Not just against him, but against the people he's working with. I glanced at the ceiling, imagining my mom asleep upstairs, her body full of whatever pills he'd been feeding her. Imagined Carl laughing in some bar, shaking hands, playing the role of good guy who gives ex-cons a chance for anyone who'd listen. What happens if I do nothing? I asked quietly. She didn't soften it. He'll take everything in your mother's name, drain whatever's left in yours, and when the feds finally catch up, the paperwork will say you helped him. That's how this works. He signs you into disaster, then walks away. I knew that already, but hearing someone else say it made it concrete. Heavy. Real. My fingers brushed the notebook on the table, stopping at a set of initials circled twice, JD, MI, with a number. One of many. Carl wasn't freelancing. He was connected. What do you need from me? I asked. Copies of everything, Angela said. Scans, photos, recordings if you can get them. Detailed timelines. And, if you're willing, your statement. I exhaled slowly. That's gonna piss him off. Yeah, she said. It probably will. But he's already hit you. Already stolen from you. Already poisoned your mother, if what Marco suspects is true. How much more damage are you willing to let him do? None. The answer was none. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was awake. I'll get you what you need, I said. But you're going to have to help me protect my mom. Silence on the line for a beat. I'll do everything I can, Angela said. And Raylan? One more thing. Yeah? People like him rely on everyone staying quiet, she said. Once one person talks, others usually follow. You won't be alone in this forever. When we hung up, the kitchen felt smaller. The walls closer. The old fridge hummed too loudly. The weight of what I'd just agreed to pressed down on me like a car on a lift. Carl wasn't just a bully with a TV spot. He was a cog in something bigger. Something interstate. Something federal. And I just decided to throw a wrench straight into the gears. The next blow didn't come from Carl. It came from my mother. Or rather, from what I discovered about her. I was sitting on the living room floor 2 days after talking to Angela, sorting through a stack of documents I'd stolen from Carl's garage. The carpet scratched my knees and the pain in my back flared every time I leaned forward, but I kept going. Paper by paper. Line by line. I thought I'd seen the worst already. I hadn't. Because at the bottom of a bright blue folder, wedged between forged titles and fake receipts, was a set of financial agreements with my mother's signature on them. Real signature. Real date. Real ink. Only. I knew she hadn't signed them willingly. Her handwriting looked weaker than usual, letters slanted and trembling, as if she'd been exhausted or dizzy or drugged. The first document, a refinancing of the house, pulling out equity and transferring ownership to Carl as the primary title holder. The second, a life insurance policy naming him as sole beneficiary. The third, a durable power of attorney. My blood ran cold. He hadn't just manipulated her. He had replaced her autonomy on paper. If Mom died, or disappeared, Carl would inherit everything without question. Legally, she'd already given him permission to manage her finances. She'd signed the house away. She'd signed her rights away. She'd become, in the eyes of the law, an accomplice to whatever he was doing. She had no idea. No one who understands paperwork signs those documents casually. Only someone sick. Distracted. Disoriented. Only someone being weakened day after day. Someone swallowing unmarked pills from a man who smiled when she obeyed. I stared at the pages until the words blurred. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't vitamins. This wasn't stress or menopause or bad luck. Carl was poisoning her. Slowly. Quietly. Conveniently. The perfect crime hidden under care. I felt sick with fury. My mother, who apologized to furniture, who cried at dog food commercials, who held on to family recipes like they were sacred texts, she was being erased while still breathing. And the worst part? If she ended up in the hospital, or in a grave, Carl would walk away clean. Because she had signed everything he needed. I pressed a shaking hand against my face and swallowed a scream. The house felt too small. Too warm. Too full of the ghosts of a future he had scripted without our consent. I needed a plan. Not rage. Not impulse. Not confrontation. A real plan. A mechanic's plan. Because Carl wasn't just building his exit. He was building our burial. The plan begins. I called Angela first. Something else is happening, I whispered into the phone. Something worse. Calm down, she said. Tell me. I explained the documents. The power of attorney. The life insurance plan. The refinance. The forged titles. The plane tickets. Silence. Then, Raylan, he's not planning a vacation. He's planning to abandon you and disappear with your mother, and her assets, before the investigation catches up. I know, I said. But it's more than that. He's been drugging her. I'm sure of it. She inhaled sharply. If he's controlling her medication, she's vulnerable. Very vulnerable. Tell me how to protect her. Angela's tone shifted. You need evidence. Medical evidence. Audio. Documents. Anything that proves she isn't making decisions in a sound state of mind. I can get that. And you need allies. People willing to speak out. I thought of Marco. Davis. The other guys at the shop who'd left suddenly. Yeah, I said. I have people. Good. Because once we move forward, you can't go back. He will know. And he will retaliate. I already knew that. Carl never lost gracefully. Send me everything tonight, she added. We'll start building a protective case around your mother first. Then we go after him. My chest tightened with something like relief. Not much. But enough to breathe. The garage allies. The next step was talking to the ex-employees. Not just Marco and Davis. All of them. It took a day to gather everyone, quietly, discreetly, at a friend's repair shop across the city. A place Carl didn't know. A place with no cameras, no curious neighbors, no shared history. 7 people showed up. 7 grown men, all of them once loyal to Carl, now sitting in a circle like survivors of the same car accident. And in a way, we were. They told their stories. Underpaid. Overworked. Threatened. Manipulated. Forced to sign paperwork they didn't understand. Used as fronts for car flips and fraudulent titles. Blamed for missing parts they never touched. One of them, Sam, brought a stack of pay stubs with mismatched dates and numbers. Another had photos of VIN plates Carl made them scrape off wrecked cars. Another had voice messages where Carl threatened to bury him in debt if he talked. Piece by piece, the truth formed. Carl wasn't just a cog. He was a willing cog. A valuable one. He fed the network clean cars, clean paperwork, clean connections, all wrapped up in the bow of his good guy mechanic persona. And he wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who got in the way. He tried to set me up for a felony, Marco said, eyes burning. He'd do the same to you. Hell, he already is. They were right. I wasn't just dealing with a cruel stepfather. I was dealing with a criminal who believed he was untouchable. But he had one weakness, his pride. Carl wanted to be admired. Wanted to be seen as a mentor, a savior, a local legend. He needed people to clap for him. If the applause stopped, he'd panic. If he was exposed publicly, he'd crumble. And if enough of us spoke together, he couldn't silence all of us. Setting the trap. Back home, the house felt different. Like a crime scene waiting to be discovered. Carl came and went. He acted like everything was normal. He kissed my mother's cheek. He ignored me. He made jokes about Belize sunsets. I smiled back. Pretended to believe him. Pretended to trust him. Pretended to still be afraid. Because sometimes revenge isn't rage. Sometimes revenge is patience. And I was very, very patient. I hid a voice recorder under the kitchen table. Another in the garage. I took photos of every pill packet. Filmed my mother's symptoms each night, her slurred speech, her trembling hands, her confusion. I collected every document. Every title. Every forged signature. Every shady VIN. I pieced together the timeline like an engine schematic. Then I called Angela again. Is it enough? I asked. I heard her exhale sharply. Raylan, it's more than enough. This isn't just fraud. This is intent to harm. Intent to escape. And medical coercion. Tell me what happens next. Next, she said. Next we take him down. The night everything finally snapped, the night the whole structure Carl built came crashing down, I remember the sound first. Not shouting. Not punches. Not even his voice. Just the buzz of the fluorescent lights in the garage overhead. That soft, constant hum that made the air feel electric. I was standing in the middle of Donovan Auto, soon to be formerly Donovan Auto, leaning against a workbench for support, phone in my pocket recording everything, when the trap finally closed. It started with a lie. Ray, Carl said, stepping out of his office with a thick envelope in hand, we need to talk about the house. My spine tensed. What about it? He smiled that fake-ass TV smile. We're refinancing again. More favorable terms. Good for all of us. My heart thudded, but my voice stayed flat. Why now? Because we need clean accounts before the Belize trip, he said casually. He didn't bother hiding it anymore. He thought I was broken enough not to fight. I let him talk. Your mother's already signed the pre-approval, he said, tapping the envelope. All you have to do is sign here. Then you're free. You don't have to come with us if you don't want to. Free. That word meant something very different to him. He laid the form on the desk and held out a pen like he was offering salvation. Go on, he said gently. It's for the best. For a moment, he really believed I'd do it. A lifetime of obedience had taught him the wrong lessons about me. I looked down at the papers. Saw my mother's shaky signature. Saw the forged lines. Saw the trap tightening. Then I lifted my eyes to his. No, the smile snapped off his face. What did you say? I said no. I'm not signing anything. He stepped closer, jaw tightening. Raylan. Don't start. Start? I said. I already started. His eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know about the forged titles, I said. The loans in my name. The VIN swaps. The stolen cars. The fake receipts. The plane tickets. The pills. His face froze. Then turned dark. What the hell are you talking about? You're poisoning Mom, I said. Slowly. Enough to make her weak. Enough to make her sign anything. He laughed, but it came out shaky. You're delirious. You've been on pain meds. I haven't taken anything in days. Then you're just crazy. I stepped forward, leaning heavily on the bench. And I have everything recorded. That got him. Carl stopped moving. Stopped breathing. His eyes flicked instinctively toward the office. Toward the safe. Toward the drawer full of papers he thought were still hidden. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice stretched thin. Yes, I do. And so will the cops. He blinked. What? I smiled coldly. You're not the only one making calls. We stared at each other in the heavy silence of the shop. For the first time, Carl looked small. Not harmless, no. Cornered animals were never harmless. But smaller. Finite. Beatable. You think anyone's going to trust you, he said, stepping closer. A washed-up mechanic with a bad back? A failure who lives off my charity? You think you can take me down alone? I'm not alone. And right on cue, the shop door swung open. Marco. Davis. Sam, 3 more ex-employees. All of them grim. All of them ready. Carl spun. What the? They're here to tell their stories too, I said. All 7 of them. He looked from face to face, unraveling. You set me up, he hissed. No, I said. You set yourself up. I just stopped protecting you. His breathing grew erratic. You ungrateful little, he lunged. I stepped back, but he grabbed my arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Pain shot down my spine, bright and electric. I stumbled against the workbench, vision flickering. You listen to me, he growled, spittle hitting my face. You think you can ruin me? I made you. I kept this family afloat. No, I whispered. You drained us. He squeezed harder. You're nothing without me. Funny, I said, forcing a grin through the pain. Because I'm the one who called the police. For a moment, he didn't understand. Then the sirens sounded outside. Not dramatic. Not blaring. Just loud enough that the whole shop froze. Carl's grip loosened. His eyes widened. "No," he murmured. "No, no, no," but it was already too late. Red and blue lights filled the windows, washing over oil-stained walls and half-finished restorations. Officers poured in. 2 detectives followed behind, one of them a woman who looked exactly like the voice I'd heard on the phone. Angela Ruiz. She held up a badge. "Carl Donovan," she said. "You're under arrest." He shook his head violently. "You can't, this is a misunderstanding, these idiots are lying, save it for court," she said. When they cuffed him, he swung wildly, screaming every insult he could think of, spitting, kicking, twisting. The officers held firm. My heart pounded so hard my stitches throbbed. At one point he looked at me, really looked at me, with a hatred so sharp it could cut steel. "Traitor," he hissed. "No," I said softly. "Survivor." They dragged him past the men he'd underpaid, humiliated, and threatened. Past the walls lined with cars built on lies. Past the life he'd crafted out of other people's suffering. He screamed until the cruiser door slammed shut. Then the shop fell quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead again. A cold, steady buzz. The sound of something ending. Or maybe something beginning. Angela approached me. "You did good," she said. "And trust me, this is just the start. There will be charges. Fraud. Identity theft. Assault. Medical coercion. Maybe more." I swayed slightly, gripping the bench for balance. "What about my mom?" "We'll get her evaluated medically," Angela said. "She's a victim. We'll protect her." A weight I'd been carrying for years finally cracked, then crumbled. Marco put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Ray." Davis nodded. "You brought him down." I exhaled slowly. Painfully. Completely. "No," I whispered. "We did." People like to say justice feels good. Clean. Satisfying. They're wrong. Justice feels like exhaustion. Like paperwork. Like long conversations with detectives and advocates. Like helping your mother relearn how to trust her own thoughts after months of being drugged into obedience. It feels like limping into a courtroom with your back still healing while Carl glares at you from the defense table, his wrists locked in cuffs he tries to pretend don't bother him. But it also feels like breathing again. Like air in lungs that have been crushed for years. Carl didn't walk away with a slap on the wrist. The charges piled high, one after another: fraud, identity theft, assault, coercion, possession of stolen vehicle parts, conspiracy, and enough financial crimes to bury him for a decade or two. The network he worked with folded under pressure. A few rolled on him. A few vanished. But the case stuck. When the verdict came down, guilty on almost everything, he didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. Small. Beaten. A man defined by control, finally stripped of every mechanism he'd ever used. My mother cried when the judge revoked his bail. Not because she missed him. Because she finally realized how close she'd come to losing everything, including herself. 1 week after the sentencing, the house felt different. Brighter. Lighter. Mom stopped taking the pills, started eating again, started smiling without forcing it. She enrolled in a small support program Angela recommended, women recovering from coercive control. The first night she came home from a meeting, she hugged me longer than she ever had. "I'm sorry I didn't see it," she whispered. "You weren't supposed to see it," I said. He made sure of that. We rebuilt slowly. Not perfectly. Not easily. But honestly. As for the garage, well, that was a conversation. After the dust settled, the city seized Donovan Auto as evidence. When the case closed, they offered it up for sale. A ruined space full of ghosts and oil stains and memories I wanted to burn. But Marco had an idea. Start fresh, he said. Not with him. With us. Us. The guys who'd been screwed over. The ones who stayed quiet too long. The ones who finally stood up. So we bought the building, cheap, almost pitifully cheap, and spent 3 months scrubbing it down, repainting walls, replacing lifts, ripping out anything Carl ever touched. My back hated every minute of it, but my heart didn't. We reopened it as Collins and Company. Auto restoration. Not flashy. Not televised. Just honest work. Sometimes customers mention Carl. He used to run a shop around here, right? I just smile and say, we do things differently. And we do. No lies. No stolen cars. No forged signatures. No one working 12-hour shifts for scraps. Just the smell of clean oil, the clank of tools, the hum of an engine coming back to life, and a crew that's more family than anything I grew up with. As for me, I've got scars now. Physical ones. Emotional ones. But they're mine, not his. The night we hung the new sign, Collins and CO, bright white letters against a clean navy background, I locked up, stepped outside, and breathed in the crisp Cleveland air. Cars hissed past on wet pavement. Neon signs flickered across the street. The world didn't change overnight. But I did. Carl once told me I'd be nothing without him. Turns out, removing him was the first step to becoming myself. And that, more than revenge, more than justice, is what finally feels like freedom. If you like this story, feel free to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.